Hello, my name is Guilherme and I help engineers to be high-performing project managers. This content is part of the warm-up content for the project management journey. The project management journey, it's an event I'm going to make that's going to show you how to further develop your career into project management. There I'm going to show a step-by-step what you should take to further develop your career. If you're interested in that, click in the link here in the description and subscribe. It's free. So the topic for today is going to be key performance indicators. Of course, key performance indicators for projects, because key performance indicators can be a very broad topic if you are looking into a company perspective there. So let's start. First of all, what's a key performance indicator? Basically, a key performance indicator is a way to assess the performance and the progress to a specific goal. To put this in very simple words, like if you want to travel somewhere, then if you're going to do a road trip, then you have a destination. For example, I'm in the Netherlands. If I want to go to Berlin in Germany, and what would be a key performance indicator for a road trip? I can measure the number of kilometers traveled. I can measure the average speed of my travel. I can average the gas consumption of the car, and among other things. And so the key performance indicators in a road trip, they are going to help me to see how far I'm getting to my target, to my goal. In this case, will be to reach Berlin, and like how long I'm traveling, how long I still need to travel to get there. So I'm going to assess the performance of the travel and how much I'm progressing into the right direction. And of course, every time you're talking about key performance indicators, it's important that first you understand, as Peter Drucker you used to say, that you cannot manage what you don't measure. Meaning that if you're not measuring anything, that it's going to be hard to know if you're going to the right direction. For example, if you're traveling by car from the Netherlands to Berlin and you're not measuring anything, how do you know when you're going to get there? How do you know if you are traveling the right direction? How do you know how long you still need to get there? If you need to stop and refuel the car and this kind of stuff, then it's very important to have this kind of to have KPIs for every project to make sure that you are moving to the right direction and you are moving to achieve the project goals. Oh, every time you talk about KPIs, the first thing that you need to keep in mind, that's important that you first have the right KPIs there. And what do I mean by the right KPIs? You can have a lot of KPIs, which I'm going to show you today also. But some KPIs might not make sense in a specific situation, or some KPIs they not bring a lot of information in a specific situation by themselves, or if they're alone. For example, again, if you're traveling from the Netherlands to Berlin, and if you're saying that you're only measuring the number of traveled kilometers there, that's a KPI. But by itself, it does not mean a lot, because if you're traveling in the wrong direction, having more kilometers will just put you far away from your target. So having those right KPIs, it's very important, and understanding that maybe one KPI is the right one, but that might mean that you also need more than one KPI to have enough information to conclude anything about a project. For example, another KPI for a travel to Berlin from the Netherlands can be the average traveling speed from the car. But again, if you are saying that I'm traveling in Germany, the autobahn 200 kilometers per hour, but you are traveling the wrong direction again, that does not help you. And if you're traveling and you forget that you need to fuel the car, that's not going to help you to get faster there. Then usually in a project you have several different KPIs, and it's important that so make sure that those are the right KPIs they're important in the specific situation, but also it's important to understand that you might need more than one KPI. And another point about the right KPI, for example, if you are traveling by plane, measuring the hours that the plane has been flying, it makes sense. But if if you are traveling by car, measuring the hours that you are flying, they do not make sense at all. Why? Because you're not flying. Then if you're trying to measure something that does not make sense in a specific situation for a project, it will not help you. I can give you other examples for that. Like if you are working a construction project, trying to measure the cost of the product, then if you're talking specifically or a manufacturing cycle time for a construction does not really make sense in this specific scenario. Of course, there's a different ways you can adapt and think about that, but again, it's very important to make sure that you have those right KPIs and you understand that you might need more than one to work together. Other very important item when you talk about KPIs and it's KPI alignments. Why? Because if you are working, for example, in a matrix organization, and it's normal that a lot of different departments they have different KPIs. But in the end, what's very important it's making sure that all those KPIs they are aligned for the same target. And here it might seem obvious, but you're going to see a lot of companies that they don't have those KPIs aligned. In this case of the traveling the car, if I also make another parallel here, would be like you have someone measuring the number of traveled kilometers, and for them their KPI they want to have as much as the maximum kilometers as possible travel there. And you have someone there that they are looking for the cheapest price of fuel. It does not matter if it's the closest one or if they need to travel far away to get the cheapest price. And then you have the driver, that in this case would be the project manager, trying to reach with the car Berlin. But you have those people, they have completely misaligned KPIs because for this person that he's just measuring the traveled kilometers and he wants to reach the maximum amount of kilometers, he might do a lot of deviations. Why? Because more kilometers, it's better for his KPI or her KPI. The person that's looking for the cheapest price of fuel, it's also the same thing. Then he might go for a gas station that has a big deviation or it's far away from the route just because it's the cheapest one. So if those people they cannot have those KPIs aligned, very likely that you're going to have problems to get your car in the fastest, most efficient way to Berlin. And this is just one example. So KPI alignment is quite important here. Of course, I made a parallel with traveling, but I can tell you also in the past, I work in the company. This was energy construction projects where the design engineer KPI, they were completely misaligned from the project. Like their KPI was number of drawings issued, which if you think about that, say, okay, but that's not bad. Yes, but then because of their KPI, all the designers, they were focusing, or their manager, they were pushing them to issue drawings. And in the end, for the construction, I could use only released drawings. So they would issue a lot of, they would not pay attention in for the release because their goal was to issue everything as fast as possible. Then you had a lot of quality issues, rework, and to release a drawing would take another 1 or 2 months. But in the end, it was another 1 or 2 months that would delay the project because the project could only use the released projects. Then again, this it's simple, but you're going to see a lot of misalignment there. And of course, probably we can talk hours about KPI misalignment in companies. But this is quite important just to make sure that you are aware of that. Another very important item, it's what I'm calling here the quality of the KPI. Because if you have the right KPIs and those KPIs are aligned, what's important next? That you have a quality KPI. Why do I mean by quality KPI? You have heard about what they call the watermelon project. That's a project that's green from outside but it's completely red from inside, this is only a bad quality KPI. Because even though you have the right KPIs and the KPIs are aligned in the organization, but then you do not have a good process to measure those KPIs, or also you have kind of the organizational culture does not help you to get the real true values of a KPI, meaning that if people are reporting the true value of a KPI, they might be punished. So in reality, what they do, they report something that's not the reality there. That's how you end up with a watermelon project. So the quality of the KPI, the process of measuring and making sure that you are really measuring the right stuff. Here I'm not talking about the right KPI, but the right status there of the project. That's quite important and it's quite relevant. Because in the end, if you do not have those three combined, your entire key performance indicator that should help you in the journey to reach your goal, to reach your target, will not help you at all. Can you imagine that if you are driving again from the Netherlands to Berlin and someone is reporting the KPI, the average speed of the car, and they are reporting the wrong number? Then you are expecting, okay, we are going to get in Berlin in another 2 hours. But instead of being traveling at 150 kilometers per hour, in reality you are traveling at 50 kilometers per hour. That will take you much longer to get there. And that it's very relevant because in this case that if you're traveling, you might have an appointment there that you might miss. If you have a project, you're going to delay your project, and there's a lot of consequences there that you can think about that. And of course, if you know that you're going to be late for something, in this case to arrive there, if you have an appointment, you might be able to change the appointment. You might be able to give heads up for the people there. So this is quite relevant and quite important, that the quality of the KPI that you're measuring is quite good. So you should never see, if you have a good quality KPI measurement, you should never see that the projects that they are what they call watermelon. This only exists because of those problems on measuring KPIs. And again, if you take over a watermelon project for someone else, for a peer or whatever happens, and you end up being responsible for a project in that situation, the first step that you should take is reporting the project correct status there. So I talk about a lot, of course, so far, why KPIs are important, things that you should take into consideration. Here I create just a quick overview about all types of different KPIs that you have. What you need to understand that different projects, you might have a lot of different types of KPI. I'm going to present to you a few of them here and also explain a few of them. At least I'm going to try to explain you in more details the more important ones. And then I'm also going to explain to you the other KPIs that you might have. For example, if you are working with a product development that's going to go for production, you are going to have production KPIs. If you are working in a project in a construction environment, you might have the health, safety, environment KPIs that you might not have in a product development project there. So it's quite relevant that you understand the type of industry that you are working on, the type of project that you have, because that also will determine the type of KPIs that your project needs to have. Of course, if I talk in general here, you're going to see that a lot of KPIs, they are very common. And if you're working in any type of project, you should have at least some type of business case KPI and some type of time KPI. What do I mean by business case KPI? You can have a first of all, business case KPI, I'm also including the cost management KPIs, which you can have the CPI, that's the standard KPI from the PMBOK, that means the cost performance indicator. Or you have, very common in companies, a lot of KPIs that they compare budget versus your estimation at completion. And here you can have a lot of variation, but there's always commonly you're comparing your budget, your baseline with your estimation at completion. Then here, that's probably one KPI that you can find in any type of project that you're going to work on. But also, if you have a business case, you can have different KPIs. You can have the net NPV, that stands for net present value, that here you are trying to estimate the value if a project is creating value in the long term or they're destroying value. You can have a KPI to measure the gross margin of the project or the operating margin of the project, or also you can have the gross margin for the product or the operating margin for the product. You can have a KPI that's called the ERR, that's internal rate of return. In the internal rate of return, you're looking for the interest rate that will bring the NPV to zero. Here it's also one of the ways that you can assess the risk of the project and how far you are from your WACC. But you also can have a KPI that's for your payback, meaning that for the amount of money that the company is investing in the project, how long it will take for the money to get this money back. That's what a payback means. So those are for sure the most common KPIs that you are going to find in a project. But again, if you are working on R&D project, you can find a KPI. You can have a KPI that's the development cost or the R&D cost divided by sales. You can have a KPI that's the product unit cost. You can have a KPI for a product market share. You can have a KPI for the total revenue, or you can have even a KPI for CapEx. CapEx stands for capital expenditure. So those are the most common business case KPIs that you're going to see out there. Then of course it's important that you as a project manager, you understand and you know those KPIs, and you also understand when it's useful to use those KPIs. Because again, if you're working in a construction project, for example, for a bridge, it might not make sense for this specific project I'm talking about market share. Because if you're doing the full bridge, there's no discussion about what's your market share. Of course, the construction company can have a market share for the industry or for the sector that's working on, true, but that would not be a KPI for the project itself, or at least not in that mode. Other KPIs that you need every time you need business case KPIs, and you need time KPIs. Why? Because your goal there in your project is to achieve the value of the project. And the ultimate goal of any project is delivering value. So one of the main ways is to measure value in a project. It's of course a business case. But a lot of times when you're talking about value of the project, it's also associated with time, because you have the deadline. Sometimes you need to launch a product, or sometimes you need to release the bridge needs to be ready because it's an infrastructure project, or you want to make sure that the project is being delivered on time, because of course if you are delaying the project, it also affects your cost. Then you always need to have a time KPI there. And here I'm bringing some of them. That's the standard one, SPI, that stands for Schedule Performance Indicator. That's the standard KPI from time from PMBOK. But you can have an S-curve. S-curve, it's basically a tracker where you see a graph form your planned progress versus your actual progress. That's very used in construction. You can have burn down or burn up charts, very used if you are working, for example, with Scrum. You can have a milestone adherence KPI, seeing that if you have 10 different milestones spread across the project timeline, that means that if you reach each of those milestones on time, that also gives you some information about the progress of the project. Some other projects you can have time to market. Depending on the type of product, it's sensitive that you have a short time to market. Why? Because of competition. You can have other types of reasons. Of course, if you're working with R&D projects, R&D research and development projects, usually the time to market is also one of the goals for any type of company in the world, is have the shortest time to market possible, because of course that also has influence in the business case and your NPV. But again, it's important here that you have at least one time KPI for your project, and which one you are going to use it will depend a bit on the project that you are going to work on and the type of project. I've never seen practice an SPI KPI implemented as stated by PMBOK, because in reality you have different ways you can do that. But what's really important in this situation, that you have a KPI to measure your time and you use it and you make sure it's updated. Then moving forward, you can have different types of KPI depending on the type of your project. You can have scope KPIs like number of change orders. That's something that you also, or number of claims. That's something that you also can see, or that you are going to see in construction projects. But you also might see other type of KPIs. For example, if you are using Scrum, the date that the user story was created. That's one way to measure how you're how old is your scope, or how much new requirements that you're getting as part of your scope. If you're working with production, if you're producing something, again, you're going to see KPIs. Cycle time. What's the cycle time to produce something? What's the yield to produce something? Yield means basically if you put 100 of material in the beginning of the line, how many good pieces you get in the end. Then if you put 100 of a material, you have 98% of good parts in the end. That means that you have 98% yield. The difference, of course, is what's called yield loss. That's loss for different reasons in the process. One other important KPI might be changeover, because if you have a product mix and how fast you can change your production line from one product to another, because this item also will affect your capacity. If it affects your capacity, that might that for sure will affect your business case. That might affect your time, or your time to market, or even your lead time there. You can have quality KPIs in projects. For quality KPIs, it can be if you're producing something, it can be ppm, that's part per million. Usually you're trying to measure the effects with that. Or you can have DMPO, that means the effects per million of opportunities. That again, you are trying to measure. Here you usually are trying to measure the level of quality of your process. Here you probably are going to have this to link it with a 5 Sigma, 6 Sigma, or even 7 Sigma production. But you also can measure the number of complaints that you have for a specific product, or the number of complaints that you have for your project team. You can measure reward KPI, customer satisfaction KPI. You can have a qualification time for KPI. For example, if you are launching a new product, if you are developing a car, there's a time that you need to qualify the car to make sure that the car is working properly, there's no failures, and you're not going to expect problems during the operation of the car, besides, of course, the normal usage of the car. Then you always have a qualification, and longer your qualification, usually it's more expensive, but that also affects your time to market. That might be also a KPI that you want to look on. You can have design KPIs. Design KPIs can be drawings released, it can be the unit cost of a product, but you can have the design lead time, meaning by design lead time, how long do you need to design a new product? You can have a KPI that's called the first time right, meaning that your first design that you put on test, that will also approve the test. You can have other type of KPI that's the design performance, like design for Six Sigma. For example, you can design a product that you expect that's going to be 6 Sigma, 7 Sigma, 5 Sigma, 4 Sigma. Of course, you want higher the better. Usually, of course, you have a cost involved with that. But understanding how good is your design, that also will affect what you're going to do: quality, production, scope, time, and everything else. So that can be a very relevant KPI to have, depending on the type of business that you're operating on. And you can have other types of KPI, even health, safety, and environment. If you are working on construction projects like number of accidents, accident severity, emergency response time. If you have an emergency, how fast you can react to the emergency in your construction site. You can have total recordable number of incidents. Every incident, if you expect more incidents you have, higher the chance to have an accident. So usually a lot of companies, they record incidents and they try to limit the amount of incidents, because if you're reducing the incidents, statistically you are also going to reduce the number of accidents. You can have other KPIs like safety training hours and a bunch of other stuff. So this is to give you an idea that you can have a lot of different KPIs depending on the type of project, depending on the type of industry, and but why I'm presenting all those different KPIs. Just to give you an idea about that, because sometimes I also get the question, which KPI it's good to have in my project? And honestly, it's impossible to tell you which KPIs you should have in your project, because I do not understand what's your project, what's the industry, what's your background, and what you are trying to achieve. Because your KPI, it should measure what's your progress, what's your performance through a goal. If you have a KPI that's not aligned with your goal, you're measuring something that's not relevant for you. So it's really not possible to tell you what KPI you should have for a specific project without having a better understanding of the project background, industry, and so on. So if you're looking for KPIs, I hope I give you here some other ideas that you can have. And again, this is not an extensive list, meaning that's a lot of extra items that you can have, like service level agreements, lead time, value of the product that you are going to have. There's a lot of other KPIs that you can look for, but those KPIs, they need to make sense to your project, in your industry, and also align with your goal. That's what's important here. But something that I can tell you for sure, that's very important that you measure. All projects, they must have at least two KPIs. One KPI for business case. In business case, the bare minimum is the cost, and one KPI for time, regardless of what type of project you are doing. Because I hear people say, I'm using Scrum, then I do not have a KPI for cost. Well, of course you should have a KPI for cost. Because even though if you're using Scrum and you have a bit more flexibility on maybe on the scope that you're going to leverage because you have a fixed release date, if you want to keep developing the product, you need budget. And if your sprints are delivering less and less and less than that you were expecting in the beginning, that means that you're going to need more sprints. More sprints need more cost. And if you already use it all your budget, you need ask for extra budget approval. That's normal in any type of company. I've never seen in my life a project that they say, no, I'm going to run Scrum, then okay, just keep running sprints until you develop. At some point, the budget will be a problem. You need to have a limit, because at some point also the extra sprints that you might need to implement extra features, they might not have a good cost benefit. So that does not work anymore. So it's very important that you are going to need to have a cost KPI regardless of the type of project you're going to use. And again, if you have a project team, the bare minimum that you have in every project team, it's hours. Because if people are working there, they're expending hours in the project, and that's a cost. Then you need to have this as a bare minimum cost KPI there. And the other one is time. Why? Again, regardless the approach that you're following. If you're following Scrum, you need to know if you have the minimum features for your release. Even though you can take it out some of the requirements, some of the scope, because they are not a must do for a specific release. You can have several other release. you need to have a bare minimum to have a release. And again, you need to understand how you are on time or not for this release. In this, we are going to see here in a time KPI. You can look for different time KPIs, like you're going to look for a burn down or burn up or whatever you want to do, S curve, SPI, or you're going to follow your progress on MS project or whatever way you need to report it, milestone adherence and so on. It's very important that you have a time KPI. If you do not have a cost KPI and a time KPI, I can guarantee for you that only looking for all the other type KPIs, that might be a problem for you. If you don't have this bare minimum here, start doing the basics. And of course, you can add more KPIs because I also talk in the example. A lot of times you need several KPIs to have a good view for a project, but also keep in mind that at some point it does not make sense to have 50 KPIs for a project. Ideally, you would like to have 3, 4, 5 KPIs that will give you meaningful information for to take decision for a project and also to assess how you're going there. Again, I hope you like this content. If you have questions, you feel free to leave here your comment, leave your question here in the comments. Also feel free to reach out with your questions or with your request for further clarification. If you like the content, please click the button like here and feel free to share with other people that think might be interested in this content here. That always help me to understand if you like it, if you share with more people that this content is valuable for you. And of course, any type of feedback you have about this content, I would love to hear from you. If you're interested in more content, more project management content, make sure you're following my channel on YouTube, but also following my Instagram account. There on Instagram, I share daily project management content there that also helps you to further develop into project management. And again, if you're interested in go deeper into project management, make sure you subscribe for the project management journey. There I'm going to talk about the step-by-steps that you need to develop to have a successful career in project management. I hope you like it and I hope you see you soon. Thank you. Bye.